Howdy, folks. Happy Wednesday. Happy hump day. We have lots to discuss. We are 1 week, 1 week and 1 day away from the NHL draft. It's 1 week away from Russ and I traveling down down I-90, up I-87 into Quebec, which will be a first thing for me. I'm anxiously awaiting my first trip to Montreal. I'm sure, Kev, you've probably been to Montreal many times, right?
I have, yeah.
I'm looking forward.
Many times, so
yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I mean, the food, the culture, the city here is very beautiful.
It's a great city.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to it. But okay, we'll start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So let's talk about Wimbledon. Serena Williams got bounced in the first round. She's now 40 years old, and she was trying to get to her 24th major, which Grand Slam victory. Which again, it's hard. Margaret Court got 24, and she was hoping maybe just to tie it. She's tried for 3 years to tie it. The interesting thing is, and Kev could attest to this, when I was, probably, in my teens, I was really into tennis. I'd watch it all the time. I still watch it. But as far as women's players, even to have a women's player at the age of 30 or 35, you're talking about 4 or 5. Billie Jean King, Margaret Court, Martina Navratilova, and Chris Evert. Like, that was it. The rest of them, most of them were done by the time they were 25, 27 years old. So the fact that Serena has gone until she's 40 is pretty amazing.
Remarkable.
Yeah.
Our biggest problem is my wife and I were just talking. My wife's a big tennis fan, and she just Serena needed matches. You can't.
She hasn't played a lot.
Yeah, she hasn't played, and I know that's what they've said in the analysis of what happened to her, that if she really wants to play in the U.S. Open, one last time or maybe longer, I don't know. But she's got to go out and play matches. Like, her days of, Tiger Woodsing it by, just picking and playing in the top things, those are done. Like, she has to get out and stay competitive. Once you reach that level.
She doesn't want to go to the French Open and play on clay. She probably doesn't want to go to the Australian Open where it's 115 degrees. She doesn't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, but she's got to go to these, tournaments that, are close to her house where, she would never dream of playing it in her prime. But now she's going to have to do that because she really needs to play. And I think that's if you're going to maintain a high level of play at her age, there's nothing like competition to keep you, moving ahead.
Well, it's the sort of keep you sharp versus keep you fresh balance here. It's like, she is 40 and she's had injuries. She's had a kid and I know that she bounced back from, I think she won a major like 2 months after she gave birth or some ridiculous thing like that. But it's, at 40, you maybe have to sort of conserve yourself for those majors just to see if you can win out there. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I give her a lot of credit that, throughout her career, she's arguably the best, maybe the second best of all time. But, it's
the level of competition such now that Kevin's right. Like, you can't take all these matches off and just hope to show up at one of these big tournaments and get into the finals. Like,
that's what Tiger does in golf, though. He skips all these.
But
he's Tiger.
Yeah, but he is Tiger, and the sport is different. It's not, you're not, competing against another, opponent.
The grind is way harder. The grind of playing a tennis game is way harder than golf. Like, let's be real.
Yeah. Let us be real. I thought you said you started in golf. I thought you were going to go down. And I don't know the whole story, so maybe you know it better, but it amused me from the bits and pieces I heard of that apparently the young tennis player who beat Serena, if I understood correctly, was supposed to play doubles, but it was a long, lengthy battle with Serena, and she pulled out. Oh. Well, she had invited someone to play doubles with her, and then left that person hanging at the court, and then called at the last minute and said, I can't make it. And that new partner ripped her on social media, just went right after her over this, saying, you invited me, you brought me in, and then you dumped me at the last minute because, and she basically said, if you can't play a 3-hour match and then come back and play, then you shouldn't be playing pro tennis. Which I thought,
I saw the headline.
Wow,
it's kind of rough, but it's true.
Yeah.
No, I was sympathetic to her, so that the woman was left in alert.
Before we start, just another example of sort of the competitive imbalance of Major League Baseball. The Yankees are playing Oakland at the stadium this week, and Oakland is right now they're one of the worst hitting organizations. They're last or second last in every offensive category, and if they're not last, the Tigers are last. They don't have a hitter who's hitting over 250. They have a pretty decent pitching staff, but like they're one of the worst teams in baseball. Detroit is up there, and Kev, if it wasn't the haves and the have-nots over the last couple of years, it's getting even worse. Where there are certain teams that are just, even if they don't have a good year, they're probably going to make the playoffs because they're so much better than the teams that are at the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, the luxury tax system really, doesn't work as well. And, some of them are really good at it. The Tampa Bay Rays, for example, have figured out a system that keeps them competitive, but not everybody does. So, and then you end up not being able to compete. But that doesn't explain the Detroit Tigers, who are a major market and, a storied, franchise. But, they thought this was their year, but they were wrong. This was not their year.
One day it will be their year, Kev, but who knows when that year will be.
Yeah, I mean,
Riley Green's going to be a good player. Even though Torkelson's batting well below the Mendoza line, I mean, he still looks like a player. I mean,
he's got power. He's got to do more.
Yeah, it just but he looks good. Like when you see a player flailing at pitches that are 18 inches, off the plate and those kind of things, you're going, oh, I don't know, but that's not Torkelson. He's fouling pitches off. He's just getting overpowered on a 97-mile-an-hour fastball, or he takes on a pitch that's right on the edge, those kind of things. But he still, he gets a hit there and hit here and there, and suddenly he looks like a player. So I think those players are going to come around. People thought it was going to be this year, and it's not.
Well, the Mets are facing an old timer today in Justin Verlander. So,
well, I was going to say there's an excuse with like sort of the ignorance of youth when Torkelson's hitting under the Mendoza line. There is no excuse for a guy like Joey Gallo, who is the bane of New York Yankees. I mean, the Yankees are like 55-20, but their fan base has no patience for Joey Gallo, who they traded for last year, and right now is hitting 167 and on base at like 60. I mean, he's hideous. I mean, he may be good defensively.
He has a good arm, right?
A good arm, and he's a good defensive outfielder, but is he hideous.
But what's the theory on how many players that we have hitting below 200? Like, it's really nutty. It's almost July.
We're going to blame it on the shift.
No, I think well, that's part of it, but I also think it's the mentality of these teams that are saying, screw batting average, swing for the fences, because analytically it's better even if you strike out, if you hit the home run more. But the thing is, power numbers are down too, so it doesn't really equate. So
here's the answer to this. I have a slight answer in the sense that last year, when the Mets got their second hitting coach, he was having everybody change their launch angle, go for home runs and whatever. And, like Jeff McNeil all of a sudden went from the Mets' best hitter to being lost, right? So this year, he went back to being Jeff McNeil, hitting to all fields, doesn't matter where the shift is. He sometimes swings at the first pitch, and he's hitting 328. Give me a whole team of Jeff McNeils, and occasionally if they hit a homer, that's fine. I'll live with that.
Yeah. I still find value in batting average, Cav. It's like, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I think there's gonna have to be a happy medium. I just remembered, remember when Earl Weaver, when they were talking about, playing small ball and stealing bases, and someone asked Earl Weaver about it. He goes, "I'll still take a 3-run homer," and and everybody laughed at it. But there's some truth to that. Like,
There is.
You need a little bit of everything. You need some speed. You need some average, and you need some power. You got to be able, if you want to come from behind.
Yeah, if you want to come from behind and you're not getting that, you do want players to make contact. It's not even so much about batting average; it's just making contact. Put the ball in play.
Yeah.
Things can happen.
Right. All right.
Well, you got some top. Just one more thing. There's some top players in this league that have a 30% strikeout rate. Like, that's totally unacceptable to me. I don't get that. So
I remember when Reggie broke the 200 strikeout barrier, and it was like a gasp from the baseball world because, again, in those days you had guys like Wade Boggs who was striking out like 65 times a year, Tony Gwynn maybe 50, and Reggie was way over 200.
Because Reggie's sort of what the ball player is now. He was a pure pull hitter. He never hit to the opposite. I think he only by accident ever hit to the opposite field. Whereas guys like Gwynn and Boggs and Keith Hernandez, they hit to the opposite field. They sort of hit them where they ain't. That is gone now. These guys, you've got the shift. You've got a guy with the 2-1 count. Lay down the bunt and get a base hit. No, they're going to hit into the shift. It's infuriating. I don't understand it. Anyway. Okay, let's start the show. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Wednesday, June 29th, 2022.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the Hockey Buzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, we've talked about the coaching vacancies. We have 3 still. There's some chatter about Winnipeg. Obviously after Barry Trotz decided he was not going to take that job or not going to coach at all this year. Russ, there's some chatter out there regarding the Boston job. We've heard of 3 or 4 names mentioned, but you've heard something more specific about one.
Yeah. Through somebody else, I've gotten like direct contact that David Quinn really had a great interview over the weekend with the Bruins. So his camp's feeling good about it. And so once I heard that, I just mentioned that, hey, don't forget about David Quinn because, he's still in this. And I think it's between Quinn and Leach. And I think, if I were to guess, and this part I'm guessing, I just know what took place on it. The rest I don't know about. But I think they probably feel good about Quinn because if you get Leach, you're getting sort of that same Bruins coach you've had for the last however many years, even before Cassidy. And sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. And when you bring in a guy like Quinn, who is from the area, did coach college out there, will also work with the young players to a degree. Again, he got a bad rap from some of the Boston media on how he handled the young players because I don't think they watched the whole season. Quinn was a little shaky with guys at the beginning, but in the end, Lafreniere and Keandre Miller, as a couple of examples, did really well under Quinn and helped get them where they are now this year. I think when you look at Quinn, he also creates a culture. He's a smart guy. He is good with the media. He has very loose press conferences like Cassidy. It's not like all this uptightness. And, and again, I'm sure to some degree he'll have to keep some comments that he would have said maybe on the Rangers away from with the Bruins because of the way that we know Cam Neely is going to want him to go. But beyond that, he's a good choice for them. So I think they're down to their last 2.
Cav, what do you think of the possibility of Quinn as the Bruins coach?
Well, it seems important to them to have someone with Boston roots too. Like if you look at all the people who've been connected, for the most part, not all, but for the most part, they've had Boston roots. And Quinn, of course, he can't be more Boston than he is. And, you get a guy who's still relatively young and yet he's got NHL experience and, he came through the college ranks. I think it would be a good fit. I think he's a good coach too. it didn't work for whatever reason in New York, but I don't think, he should be ostracized forever just because it didn't work out with the Rangers.
Okay. So some news and notes on before we start talking a lot about the draft. Like I said, we're 8 days away from it, so I think we should start focusing on the draft a lot more. There's a lot of interest in it, but some injury news came down. Not the injuries of the Tampa Bay players and the Colorado players, but apparently, and this is pretty big news for Florida because they got 30 plus goals out of Anthony Duclair. He was one of their more surprising players, although he's been on the cusp of of being a really effective player a number of times. But he had in an off-season workout, he had an Achilles injury. Now he's going to apparently have surgery. And Kev, we know Achilles injuries are not like 3 weeks. This is 4 to 6 months, probably at the absolute best. So he's going to miss significant time going into the regular season.
Yeah, that's a tough situation for the Panthers, given how he developed there and became, the player everyone hoped he would be. And he seemed really comfortable and happy there. And so this is tough news for them. And, we don't really kind of know what the Panthers will look like next season because, they added a bunch of pieces, but, can they, figure out a way to work, Claude Giroux back in? Can he, do they have the money to sign him? Because I think they're, probably the favorite to do that if they want to do it. It seems like that's where he enjoyed it there. So I don't know. And now, maybe this, creates some cap space for him. Maybe that's the silver lining, at least on a short-term basis that would allow them to, bring in Giroux.
Yeah, I think they're going to want to try and bring in Giroux, and I think he'll want to play there. They do have some good young players in Grigory Denisenko, who didn't have a full season in the A last year, and Logan Huchko, who's really fast and actually could be the missing speed element if they give him a chance. He's about fourth in scoring on the team. I watched him in college. I think he can play at this level, but he's not a top 6 guy. They're not getting a Duclair type, but they could get a speed equivalent and somebody who could pop in some goals. And I think that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to, mix and match some of their young talent and hope that Giroux does come back. Because having Giroux for a full season would be a big boom for them.
But I don't perceive that Giroux's going to come in for what Duclair's making, which is $3 million.
No, he'll want a little more.
Right. So I continued. I looked at Florida's roster, and I keep looking at Patrick Hornquist as a buyout candidate because he's making $5.3 million last year of his deal. They would open up a significant amount of cap space if they bought the last year of his contract out, and that plus Duclair might be enough room to re-sign Giroux. But, down the road, you're going to have to create cap space, and you still have to sign Huberdeau. Huberdeau's a UFA at the end of next year. And, to my mind, Kev, he's an $8.5 to $9 million salary. So, their problems, their issues are not solved by one guy going on LTIR. They have to move Bobrovsky, and I don't think they're going to be able to.
No, not unless they can get him down to $6 million is what I figure. If they'll keep $4 million, like $6 million, that's just a little above $5 million, which seems to be what people want to play. So, or pay for a goalie. So, and he, Bobrovsky was good last season. So, he could solve a lot of problems. Like, there are several teams that could use Bobrovsky. So maybe they could work it out. But, yeah, I'm sure they've got some kind of a plan, but I did want to break up because I found it so amusing, the breakup press conference with Julien Brisebois talking about that he certainly wants to bring Palat back, and then he volunteered that he also wants to keep Paul and Rutta as well. And this team is already over for next season, the salary cap, before they even start. Now they got the Seabrook, as Mike calls it, a coupon, which will give them a little bit more relief. But that's not enough even to sign Palat, I don't think.
No.
So, it's just going to be so interesting to see, what Brisebois does in order to make this work. I mean, he certainly has a magic touch when it comes to figuring out creative ways to do it.
I mean, I'd be shocked if Palat doesn't at least take offers. Doesn't mean he's going to leave, but I'd be shocked.
No, I think he's already committed to staying. He loves it there, and
okay.
Well, okay.
I don't see.
This is the only way that they can make it cap friendly, for lack of a better term. I mean, Palat's is 31. They can offer him an 8-year max extension. Now he was making, I think, $5.5 million. If they offer him a 8-year deal at $6 million and structure where the first 6 years are much higher than the last 2, we've seen that front loaded type of deal, then that might be palatable enough for them to get him re-signed. And, those last 2 years are basically just voidable, that they'll probably buy him out or he retires after 6 years. But then you still have to make tough decisions. Do you trade Alex Killorn in the last year of his deal? Clear $4.5 million. Do you add more LTIR? I mean, anything is possible, but I just don't see how they sign Palat and Paul and Ruda and
they won't be able to sign all those guys. No.
Yeah. So
the only thing is, the one thing that they have going, when you look at the money, you also have to look at how many guys they actually have under contract. They have 19, right. So they only trying to sign 4 guys.
Right.
So that's why I think it's possible, but still somebody's going to have to go. It might be Killorn, and I don't know what they're going to give Ruda, and
Ruda's a loss. I mean, it's funny. I mean, as weird as it sounds, he's come through in the clutch with some bizarre goals at key times for them.
Well, okay, I'm not going to sign off. I'm not going to write off Tampa Bay next year because, like you just said, Kev, 19 contracts. They only have, right. If they don't sign these guys, they'll probably find other guys to plug in that are willing to take less, like Perry did, like Belmar did, to come and have a chance at winning a championship. But next year they're toast. Cirelli, RFA, Ross Colton, RFA, Sergachev, Cernak, and Cal Foote. Good luck.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, though, Mike, is as Ken Holland used to tell me, you always talk about our problems, but everybody has those problems. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're not in a vacuum. Everybody's facing that. Everybody's got to make tough decisions. So, I agree with you. I mean, that's not a task, but, all around the league, everybody's making tough decisions. And
any of the good teams, like all the Final Four.
I mean, they're all dealing with it. So I don't think that theirs are any worse than anybody else's that they're dealing with, especially when we haven't had the growth in the cap because of the COVID situation. So it is going to be interesting to see. They will have to make some hard decisions, but one thing in Detroit that I have found curious, and nobody really talks about it much, but Yzerman hasn't given out any long-term deals.
No.
Like he has extended, when he's extended people, it's been 2 years. He had to give a 3rd year to somebody, but that's pretty much all he's been going. Well, now this summer, he's a year away from unrestricted free agency for Larkin and Bertuzzi. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. I would think with Larkin, they would be more than willing to lock him up. He's a hometown guy. He's the captain. But I don't know, Bertuzzi. It'll be interesting to see what they do with him.
Would you think that Yzerman would be proactive in after next season signing Seider to an 8-year deal or long-term deal?
Oh yeah, for sure. Seider is walks on water here, and so I would say for sure. But if you're Seider, do you want that? Maybe not. Maybe what you're looking for is a 4-year deal or a 5-year deal, and make enough money to make you comfortable, but then give you a chance to hit the grand slam. When you're see, what would he be then? 20. If
it's a 3-year deal out of ELC, he'd have 1 year with arbitration to go to UFA. He'd be 24.
Yeah,
or 24 or 25. So you have a chance to walk, or you have a chance to hit the major deal at 24 years old. So then you'd sign that until age 31 or 32. That's, that also leaves you young enough that you could sign another long-term deal. If you're like 30, 31, something like that. I mean, you could get 2 big paydays in your history. So that
Well, here's another thing that's interesting about the Red Wings. They have $35 million under the cap. And then, I brought that up. Somebody says, yeah, but they got to re-sign Bertuzzi and Larkin. Well, Bertuzzi's already making 4.75 and Larkin's making 6. So even if, say, Larkin goes to 9, and he may not, but say that's only, $3 million more. And if Bertuzzi went to 8, that's $3 million more. So you're only bringing, his 35 million under the cap goes down to 29 million. Like, the Red Wings have an incredible amount of space under the cap. And he is really, so at some point they're going to, go out and try to sign a lot of free agents. So, I think this year they're going to try to get a center. And I mean, let's look at, if Malkin leaves, I don't think there are a lot of options for Malkin because of his demand. Like, he wants to get a 3-year deal and he wants to be paid, real money.
That's why we mentioned Washington, assuming
Washington's one. I think the Rangers could find a way to fit him in. They're going to need a second line center, but I think they might be more willing to give him a bigger contract than Ryan Strome.
Example. Well, I looked and I saw about 4 teams that I thought could really kind of handle that money, saying that, if you had to give him $7 million, a 3-year deal, $21 million. I mean, does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Well, that's reasonable. And again, I think, Strome's going to make at least 6. So I think if you're asking them to pay 7 for Malkin, I think they would do it.
Well, Washington, I think Los Angeles would.
Los Angeles is one I had.
Yeah. Well, Russ, the calculation, as we welcome Anthony and Joni to the show, the calculation about what's going to happen with the Rangers up the middle took an interesting turn today with the report from Francois Gagnon from RDS that the Rangers, even before the end of the season, were inquiring about the availability of Pierre-Luc Dubois, who's an RFA with Winnipeg. He's 2 years away from being an unrestricted free agent. He obviously, there was a shot across the bow last week when he told Jets management that in 2 years he will not sign with them, that he's going to go free agent. So, he's giving them fair warning. I mean, he could sign a bridge deal, but it's sort of like a Trouba situation where, he clearly doesn't want to stay there long term. Now, maybe that's a ploy just to get more money, but
look, I'm a big PLD guy, but the problem is he didn't want to play center last year.
Right. And I think the Rangers
make him want to play center in New York.
Right.
We're 2 teams now where he's basically made that declaration. So that's the consideration here when we're looking at that. And that's, when I look at the Rangers and how their lineup set up, if he's willing to play center, then that would be a really good thing for them. But if that's not what he's looking to do, the Rangers have to kind of consider that in terms of, making that kind of an acquisition.
I mean, at the risk of sounding like a kid picking teams out of a schoolyard, but do you want a guy who doesn't want to play the position you want him to play, that won't say, I'll do it for the good of the team?
No, I would not want him at that position, because I think much like what he's experienced in Winnipeg, he will experience in New York, because when you're a center of the Rangers, no matter what line you're on, you get a lot of interest and a lot of talk.
There are very few teams out there that would be interested in Dubois as anything other than a center. And because when I heard the Dubois thing last week, I'm like, of course I think it through everything Toronto related. Okay, the Leafs with Matthews and Tavares 1-2 don't need Pierre-Luc Dubois to play center. They could use him. He's a big physical forward who can score. He had scored 28 goals last year. and that they would probably want him to play the wing. He'd be a power forward for them. They now then the question is, would they be able to get him? Would they be able to afford him? He's arbitration eligible, 2 years away from UFA, and he scored 28 goals last year, so he's probably going to get $5.5 million on a new 2-year deal. So that's a hefty price tag, but. Yeah, I think most teams that trade for him are going to want him to play up the middle. That's where the value is.
Yeah.
Okay, the other thing that Elliot Friedman reported this morning, or actually last night, was that the Kevin Fiala chatter is sort of heating up. Now, he was cryptic about it. He didn't say what that meant, but I think you would – I mean, obviously it's one of two things. Either he's signing a long-term deal with Minnesota, which I would find it hard to believe because they don't have the cap space, or they're trading him. Now, Kev, we've talked about Fiala on the show. I mean, I think he's got a lot of value. I don't think Minnesota can afford him. It would be tough. I mean, with the $12 million in dead money that they have with Suter and Parise's buyout. So trade sounds the most likely, but what do you think that Minnesota can get in a trade for Fiala?
Well, I mean, I think they can get significant assets. I think you're going to get at least a player and a draft pick, out of that deal. I mean, he's coming off a pretty good year. So,
yes.
That was a career year, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So I think they'll do reasonably well. But the problem is when you have to trade a guy, we all know what happens is that they know that you got to move the guy, so they're going to give you just a little less than they would if you didn't have to trade the guy. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I found it curious that one of the teams that seems to be most interested is Nashville, who had him and didn't like the Fiala experience, but apparently they feel they'll like it better this time around now that he's a more
he needed time to mature like a fine wine.
Yeah, exactly. So
fine wine from Switzerland. No, but the funny thing is that Fiala might be the Forsberg fallback. Go with the Fs. Going crazy here. But I mean, if they can't get Forsberg signed for under what they pay Yossi, which is $9 million, which we talked about, that's probably what he wants. Fiala probably they can get for maybe 7.5. I mean, maybe.
The only problem is that every goal scorer who's not a Nashville bred guy always goes there, and the goal totals go down. So,
yeah, I mean, do you really think he could get $7 million, Fiala? I don't.
No, 7's a little high.
Well, yeah. He got 5-1 last year, and he scored 85 points. Now he's arbitration eligible, 1 year away from being a UFA. I'll bet you the ask will be 7.5.
Yeah, that'll be the ask, but I think he might get like 6.2, something like that.
Yeah,
that would be the settlement.
Yeah, I thought it would be in the 6s as well. That just seems like a bit much, because beyond obviously points are big in arbitration, but he's not a complete player. Let's put it that way.
Right.
Now, let me ask you guys this, because I'm still curious about this. Do you think that Forsberg was just aggravated to when Nashville put out there that, we gave him an 8-year offer? Like that would tick me off.
I think it makes him look like the bad guy.
Because I think that probably killed any chance of him coming back. I think.
Yeah, I'm surprised at that. So.
Yeah, if there was a chance.
You do that basically because you want to have the built-in. We gave it our best shot, but we just can't do it. But still, it's one of those things where when you're a long-standing soldier, as Forsberg has been in that organization, it kind of feels like a little bit of a stab in the back.
I'll tell you that the equivalent was for me back in the day when Darryl Strawberry was threatening to leave the Mets. The Mets gave him that final offer, and they knew it was well under what he was wanting, and they knew he was not going to accept it, but they made it public anyhow. And that's basically what's going on here.
All face. I mean, it is what it is. It's all face saving in this
Yeah.
case. So they know that, there's we're prepping everybody for this fact of life that's about to happen.
But if you're, I really like David Poile, but if you're ownership of the Nashville Predators, do you say to your general manager, how could you not get Forsberg done? He's.
Yeah, I think the owner probably is asking that question.
This is a guy that wanted to stay there. I don't know why they just wouldn't give him Yossi money. He's proven his value.
He has.
They
are in the midst of how soon is the ownership change for them coming? Is that supposed to be
now? I think
yeah, but he's only going to be a minority owner, I believe, at first, and then over time he becomes the majority.
But does that create maybe some level of, I don't know, in this circumstance, maybe some lack of stability, or they're not certain, at least in the interim? But again, it's with a long-term contract. But again, that's what I'm wondering.
We just talked about Fiala being a possible replacement, but if I'm a season ticket holder and you're telling me Forsberg or Fiala, I don't see those players as comparable.
No.
Well, you're definitely taking B versus A.
How about Forsberg and Fiala, and how can you accomplish that? By buying out the last 3 years of Ryan Johansson's contract. And I know they bought out Turris, and they're paying for that until the apocalypse. But 3 years buyout of $8 million for Ryan Johansson. The cap hits $2.6 million for 6 years.
But that goes to, it's still money that's outlaid, and if they are in the midst of a transition, I do wonder again. It's still money that's outlaid,
and a new owner coming in.
Yeah. But everybody else other than Forsberg, Duchesne, Ekholm, Yossi, Saros, they're all locked up long term. The only one that's right now the question is Forsberg. And if you buy out Johansson and you sign Forsberg, then okay, Johansson had a pretty decent year last year, but he didn't jump off the page like Duchesne did. So
maybe they have the analytics that maybe they're looking at it and saying, is the investment worth it over the long haul? Right. Most of these contracts that are signed now for Nashville, how long are how long is Ekholm's deal for?
He just signed, so I think he's got 4 years left. Yeah.
So
but this is sports. Like Anthony, this is sports. How often do any contracts?
No, they don't. They don't. But again, it does. Then it comes down to me. Then, if you prioritize these other players over Philip Forsberg,
right?
That tells me in terms of what is it that you're valuing as an organization that you're not willing to.
And this is the factor. If they buy out Johansson, the combination of Johansson's buyout and Turris's buyout is $4.6 million. That's dead money on 2 mistakes that David Poile made in terms of signings. So maybe that's a factor there too.
Yeah. Let one question here is how you have to look to how much money the Predators have to spend. They have enough for Forsberg. That's why I'm about that. And how much do you think they're offering him? So what's the difference here? Do you think they're offering him?
I think they're offering him the same as they're paying Duchesne and Johansson. I think they're offering him 8x8.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he already told them. I'm pretty sure that I got to get more than Duchesne and Johansson because this is meaning
to dollar value as a translation of the meaning that I have to your organization.
Yeah, I assumed they were offering him 8 at 8.5, so which is what $58 million, and getting in the 60s had become it used to be what the average was, and then about 2 years ago. It started to be about what the total was. All of a sudden you kept hearing 60-some million. Everybody had to get 60-some million.
Yeah.
Well, so I just assumed they were offering 8.5. Well, it's not a big leap, at least in terms of cap hit, from 8.5 to 9.3. Isn't that what? No, Yossi's not even that high. He's just over 9.
9.05. Right.
So you just got to get to 9.1. So you say to him, we'll just take you there, and you and Yossi. That's fair too. He and Yossi are the top 2 players on the team.
Yeah.
So I I don't know why you're of all the people to pick a fight with, why Forsberg?
It's the cap paradox. That's what it is.
Yeah, no, I just don't get that. Like, especially a guy who's really been a model citizen for you.
Now here's the conversation that we have every year this year, and I'm not going to spend more than a couple minutes on it, and it's a waste of time because they never happened, and they're called offer sheets. And I know that Eck loves to bring them up because it's great speculation. And Frank Cervalli on Daily Faceoff brought up a list of his top 7 potential offer sheet targets. And number 1 on the list is Martin Necas from Carolina. Now remember, these are RFAs who are coming off their entry level deals, who are not eligible for arbitration, so they can be offered the qualifying offer, but they can still sign an offer sheet. Carolina is not a cap team right now. So if somebody signed Necas to an offer sheet, somebody would be able to match it.
Yeah, and depends on how they feel. Like he hasn't lived up to expectations.
And that's why I don't think somebody's going to sign him to an offer sheet.
Right, like he hasn't been the player they thought he was going to be.
Right.
So I mean, but is that any different than Kotkaniemi?
No, they were basing it on future talent and whatever their analytics were telling them about him being rushed and not utilized right. And now that the rubber's hit the road, they're finding out that it's somewhere in between that.
Yeah, but I do think that was the case of Carolina thought that he was going to kind of come around, and he hasn't. So
The number 2 on the list, and I won't go through the whole thing, but the number 2 on the list is Jake Ottinger. Come on, no, I mean I can see a ton of teams wanting to sign him to an offer sheet, but do you think Dallas is not going to match almost every offer sheet that's out there?
Considering the fact they've already dealt off Ben Bishop right at this point, so we know he's never going to play again, but still. All that move to me was the earmark in preparation for Jake Ottinger.
Right.
To read off the others just so we know who they are.
Okay, number 3, and this is what I was going to mention. Number 3 is Rasmus Sandin of the Leafs. I don't think that will happen simply because the Leafs will probably match any offer sheet again. Even if a team puts them in a position where he's going to make $4 million, they'll just trade. They will trade off somebody else to make the room. Eetu Luostarinen from Florida Panthers.
Yeah, nobody's going to offer sheet him.
Yeah,
he's a good player, but not.
Yeah, Noah Dobson. I would be surprised if Lou doesn't pay him.
He will match it no matter what.
Right. Sean Dursey of the LA Kings.
Dursey.
Yeah. I mean,
the draft picks wouldn't be crazy for Dursey.
If you're going to go low, if it's like it's sort of a low grade surprise.
If you offer him a 1-year deal, or if you offer him a deal at $4 million, it's a 2nd-round pick.
Right. He's the low end one where somebody could maybe
and that's what I'm saying. Someone in this circumstance that you could potentially, I think, before if they get the whiff that happens and they think they can give them compensation, it would be a trade probably before
that. But LA's got the cap space, and their weak spot is defense. So why?
I agree in this circumstance. I don't think it's I think it's possible someone could do it, but he's one of those low grade guys. I think in this case.
Yeah, and Nicolas Roy from the Vegas Golden Knights was another one. Capo Caco and Nicholas Hague from Vegas were honorable mentions. So
both.
I bring it up because there've been sort of rumbling. I don't know if it's just created in the fan base here in Detroit, but there's been a lot of discussion about the Red Wings and Capo Caco. So.
Okay. Kev, have you heard anything about trade rumors regarding Nedeljkovic? Because there's been some mention out there in regards to goaltenders and who possible options for teams looking for goaltenders. Now, he's got 1 year left at, I think, $3 million, and then I think he's a UFA.
I've not heard anything, but nothing would surprise me because they've got Kosa. He's still 2 or 3 years away, but Nedeljkovic is not going to be the goaltender of the future. It's presumably going to be Kosa, although Nedeljkovic is still relatively young. He's 26. So, nothing would surprise me if you offered Steve enough. I'm sure he would take it, and then just sign another European, and because he still believes that they're still a long way away. So
okay, let's move to the draft here. And Russ, it was funny. I listened to Bob McKenzie. He did a spot on TSN radio in Toronto, and he caused a lot of seismic events regarding Slavkovsky being the top on his list. And he explained the reason why. His methodology is he takes 10 scouts that he normally asks questions for and asks them to rate like say the top 10 players. And of the 10, 5 said Slavkovsky, 4 said Shane Wright, and 1 said Logan Cooley. So he named Slavkovsky the number 1. And then he increased his list, and it was basically an even split, but he still stuck with the original 10, and that the 5 of the 10 voted for Slavkovsky. So, I mean, I think we all know. I'd be dumbfounded if we were in Montreal next week and all of a sudden Jeff Gorton steps to the microphone and says Slavkovsky. So I'm not going to be gobstopped by it.
I don't think it's gonna. I don't think it's gonna happen.
I'm doubtful it happens. I do think it's going to be right, but if if they come up to the podium and say Slavkovsky, it's not going to surprise me. It's not been a slam dunk. We know this.
No, but here's what I'll say. First thing is, if you talk to enough scouts, if you speak to 10 scouts, you'll be lucky to get them all to agree on anything. That's one thing.
Right.
I'll tell you what I told the producer of SiriusXM before I went live when they told me that yesterday. I said, that's nice, but Bob McKenzie's not making the pick. The Canadians are. And then the other thing that I'll tell you is, and this is to answer Vepsis's question, it's very rare that you get a guy in a draft class that like all 32 teams would say, yes, this guy's the number 1 overall pick. Very rare. Connor McDavid, sure. Sidney Crosby, sure.
Not Mario Lemieux. Remember?
Right. Yeah. And that's what I'm saying. That's not uncommon. So I think everybody's just like overreacting to something that was going to garner a lot of clicks and just say, think about it for a minute. You're asking all 32 teams to sign on for Shane Wright. We knew that wasn't happening, but it only matters to one team. That's all it matters to.
Well, it was only 10 teams as well, but
right.
I'm with Russ. I don't see this happening whatsoever. I just think centers are too valuable, and I watched Bob's discussion of it, and what he said was, and I found this really interesting, that the scouts that he talked to, basically agreed that neither of these two guys can instantly be projected as top line performers. Like they're top 6 performers, but both of them right now are projected as second line players as well, which I thought was really kind of interesting. Now, both of them have the potential to be first liners, but but I do think centers are too hard to get.
They are.
So I think Montreal, will just take the center and call it good. It's so close. When it's close, you take the center.
Yeah,
maybe they'll take Logan Cooley then.
So
no, I don't think they'll do that.
Yeah, I don't see that either.
But McKenzie said basically the consensus was that Wright would be a really good number 2 or a bad number 1.
I disagree with the bad number 1 part.
I can't. He didn't use the word bad, did he?
He said. And he said weak. I mean, I don't think he thinks that he's a number 1 center. So, but he thinks he'd be a really good number 2 because he's more of a two-way guy. The offensive game isn't quite. He may not have said bad, but I bet I'll own that. I'll say that I said bad.
Okay, again, his offensive game in juniors has been really, really good. Well, he was more than a point a game in the playoffs. He's been around too long. Too many people have watched him for too long. Since the age of 15, he's literally going up against himself. That's the
Russ, and that was the point. That was the point that he made. He says there were a lot of people who hesitated on Wright because his goal total last season was the same as his goal total as a 16-year-old. So it was like they were like, okay, there wasn't any growth there.
There's a reason. No, but there's a reason.
Right.
If you talk to him, he'll tell you the reason. The reason is He
And
tried
he
to make his teammates better. He was spreading around the wealth. He wanted to make his team better. It wasn't about his personal stats.
Right. And he said that at the combine. He said, and he also said, like, okay, at certain points I just let the pedal off, and then at certain points I hit the pedal. And like, the teams don't want to hear that. But let's talk about the defensemen, because I think that, with the Flyers pick at 5, with Toronto and late in the first round, with a number of other teams, where do these defensemen go? I mean, it sounds like the consensus is that the top 3 are going to be in no particular order: Wright, Slafkovsky, and Cooley. And then 4, 5, Anthony, you start to hear Juracek and Nemec, and I mean, it's a question of who Seattle wants and who is going to be left for Philadelphia. And if Philadelphia doesn't like the guy that's left, do they trade down, or do they go with somebody else off the board?
Well,
what do you think?
Chuck Fletcher spoke to that today during this press conference, and became the conversation of the big conversation was, how often do we see a team trade out from number 5 and move down, which it's pretty rare. I think the last time might have been Luke. I think they mentioned Luke Shen. I'm not sure. It might have been. It's been
the Islanders traded out from 5,
right? And the likelihood of moving up in this draft is extremely slim. So in all likelihood for Philadelphia, I don't think they're going. I think they're staying at 5, based on what and that's what my expectation has been for a while. The only reason they have to listen to it if it's a player that they don't, that's likely in their late 20s in this circumstance, someone who can help them now and down the road. But again, you have to account for cap and everything else, and what you're going to have to do in that circumstance. So in the end, I think Philadelphia will take whoever is available best at number 5 for them. Now, whether that will be in terms of defenseman or a forward, that's something to be determined. We know it's not a goaltender. Even Fletcher spoke to that, that it would be in either of those 2 positions. So it's interesting. Again, they kept their cards extremely close to the vest, as expected. Sam Carchidi asked a couple times, and Brent Flair kind of laughed. He says, "You're not getting it out of me, Sam." So, and that's expected. So, if I'm sitting in that chair and one of Juracek or Nemec is there at number 5, they're likely my picks in that spot. Gauthier is interesting to me. We had this discussion on Off the Post Radio with Brad Allen the other night, and there's some, obviously Lekaramaki and Kemmel are both fascinating figures in this circumstance. But I think when all's said and done, Philadelphia does need. I think you can argue in both circumstances with either defenseman that those would be the picks there, I think, for Philadelphia if either one of Juracek or Nemec is there.
Here's what I think is going to happen with some of these defensemen. I also think Seattle's in the market for a defenseman, Mike. Just so you know, I think that's likely what they'll do, depending on who's there.
Well, our good friends Adam Kimmelman and Mike Morial, in their mock draft, they had Seattle at 4 taking Nemec and had Juracek going to Philly at 5.
And I think there's a likelihood of that if those guys go down that way. But just sort of reading the room and hearing things lately, I'll give you 4 names that all could be gone by the top 12, because sometimes the way drafts go is teams are looking for a defenseman, and if they feel like they're drying up, then they're going to get theirs before they feel like
there'll be a run. Yeah,
the A defensemen dry up. So the A's are Korchinski, Nemec, Juracek, and Minchukov, and I think they could all be gone by the top 12 picks. If 2 of them are taken the way that we all kind of think that they might with 4 and 5,
right,
are in the top 10. I mean, we're all seeing how important offensive defensemen are, and these are the best of the guys that I think are the offensive defensemen in this draft. Lane Hudson, he's an interesting one because he's 5'8.5", but no one's going to take him in the top 12.
Well,
because he's 5'8.5". That's a guarantee.
Well, okay, Kev, let me ask you this, because I would be genuinely shocked if Detroit at 8 would take a defenseman, since they got Edvinsson and they have Sider. I mean, we know defense is important, but again, Morial and Kimmelman predict Lekaramaki at number 8 for the Red Wings. And I would think that Yzerman would be going for the best forward that he could get his hands on at 8.
Well, I mean, they don't necessarily see that way, but if it's close, like they would take a defenseman if that was the best player available. If one of those, say, if Nemec moved fell, like they might take him. I don't think they would take Jiricek. I want to ask a question after I'm done with this, but I think I think if I had to guess right now, I think the players they're interested in is if Gauthier fell. They would certainly be interested in him. I think they're interested in Marco Kasper. There's been a lot of discussion about. I know Bob has sort of dropped a bomb that some teams might have him in the top 5.
Wow.
And the question is do you think he can score? Because he's a very mature player. He's played very well for a very good Swedish team. But people are confused about that. I know they spent. I think you even told me, Mike, that they talked to Kem all day, the Red Wings at the combine, and I've subsequently heard that interview went very well. But he's small, right. And the Red Wings have a lot of. Yeah, they have a lot of smaller players, so they're looking for a bigger player. So that's my guess. Now, Lekkerimäki, he's Swedish, he's talented. So the Red Wings are in on him. So that's a possibility as well. But what I was going to ask, Russ, and you certainly know more about this than I do, is there's been a lot of discussion amongst the scouts that I've talked to about the fact they're not so sure that is it the Czech defenseman, Jiricek, whether he has offensive ability. And some of them think that he's no better than a second pairing guy. He'll be a good second pairing guy. What's your thoughts on his offensive ability?
No, I think his offense is there. I watched him in the World Championships as an example with very little around him, and he had to do everything on his own. Like he had to bring up the puck on his own. He had to set up the power play on his own. Like he didn't have any real help. And he did a pretty good job with that as an 18-year-old. So I do think the offense is there, and I do think his physicality will open up some room on the offense. He could be a real bull in the china shop when he wants to be. I've called him, like, he's been on some missions that he's sort of like a destroyer, and that's where he could really create some things offensively. Is he dynamic offensively? No, but I think he's going to get his points. I don't even know if Nemec is dynamic offensively. Korchinski is, but he doesn't play defense. So they're going to, that's going to be the tough part, is his defensive game isn't good. And Minchukov actually has probably made the most strides in all areas of being a two-way guy, and he's 6'3". So again, I don't think he's going to be around that long either.
But do you think the Russian factor might?
No, because he played in Saginaw, Mike. So
okay.
He's already here. There's no factor with him. But the interesting thing about all of these guys is, like, Korchinski could end up in the top 10 because his offense is that good. He is a tireless worker on and off the ice. His teammates have told me that. I've interviewed a few players from Seattle now. I've actually 3. So I've got a good idea about Korchinski. And you see the offense that he's got. But again, he's going to have to round out his game, much like a Brandt Clark with the Kings. Brandt Clark's more than a point a game in juniors as a defenseman, but he's got to get better defensively, right? So Korchinski would have to be on that same route, where the other 3 are much more closer to being complete defensemen now and in the next 2 years. So that's why I foresee this run on these guys, because after that, Matejchuk's very good. He might be the next guy. I'm finalizing, my list now, but there's not enough of these guys based on the demand that teams have for offensive defensemen, or at least defensemen that can add offense, even if it is second pairing, Kev. I mean, again, there's some really good second pairing defensemen in this league now that teams would kill for. But I do think he has a chance of being a top pairing guy. I do, Jiricek.
The name that I brought up when we were talking, Russ, yesterday was Savoy, obviously, because I'm sort of fixated on these, the smaller players and where they're going to fall on the draft board. And like I said, I look at Buffalo at 9, and their situation where Middlestead is okay. He's not a bust, but he's not what they expected him to be. Maybe he slots in more as a third line guy or on the wing. I don't know if he's, but they have Tage Thompson. I don't think he's a number one center in terms of, he's got the size and he scored 30 some odd goals, but I don't know whether they think he can be the playmaker that the number one center can be.
I mean, he is for now.
He is for now, yeah. But I think that their organization, we know that they experimented with Dylan Cousins up the middle. I think he's a winger. They experimented in the AHL with Jack Quinn up the middle. I think he's a winger. Whereas, Savoy is a center. Brad Allen said he's a center. Now he's small, but he might be a perfect fit for Buffalo, where they have bigger wingers and they can have a smaller center and it works out for them.
Yeah. I mean, I speak to, Shane Malloy a lot, obviously. We used to do Hockey Prospect Radio together, and he'll be on next
week. Tell about it?
I have lived to tell about it, and he'll be on Off the Post next week. But he gave me a great comp for Savoy, and he said Mike Comrie. And Mike Comrie was a really good center for the Edmonton Oilers. He would get his 60 points, and he would be very dangerous on the ice, and he would score his goals. And I actually think Savoy is a little better than Mike Comrie. He's already physically there, as you heard Brad talk about on Off the Post. But not only is he already physically there, he's got the mind of a coach. So he knows exactly where he's going to go on the ice before he goes there. Now, do I think he could be a second-line center? Yeah. He's not going to be a top-line center. No way. That's not going to happen. But he can be a second line.
I talked to a team a person who said about Savoy. He said, when you're sitting around at the trade deadline, when you're having your meetings, never once does it come up and say, what would really tie this team together is we could get a little center. We could go out and find a little center. He said, you never hear that.
No.
So he said, more likely we're going to move Savoy to the wing because he's very talented. And, there have been a lot of wingers that are small that are flying around and getting it done. But he said, I just don't, in this game, the way it is now, I just don't see him playing center. So,
yeah, I think there's a chance. But either way, he's a heck of a player. And I think there's a chance that he could fall to 9 based on the height bias that still exists in the NHL draft and the NHL. And I do feel like he's going to pay off for somebody in a big way, like a DeBrincat did, but not that big because he's not going to the second round. And similar to Caulfield, I think he's going to pay off. He's not going to be the goal scorer that Caulfield is, but he's a way better playmaker. And he's got a lot of his game down already. And that's a big deal. So, again, we'll see what happens with Matt Savoy. He is a fascinating one. And, again, I would want him on my team.
Okay, we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Anthony Mangione, for Russ Cohen, for Kevin Allen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's